Well, let's jump in. And again, thank you so much for being part of the 4A's 2026 look ahead. Our goal in doing this is really to help agencies better anticipate and prepare for major industry shifts as we think about the future next year and even beyond. There are certainly no right or wrong answers here. We're talking to industry leaders from across the ecosystem. So what we're looking for is really just your own perspective and experience versus, feeling like there's a right or wrong way to answer these questions. As you know, as we explore how agencies and marketers might evolve over the next year and beyond, to help frame that discussion, we're kind of proposing two potential futures for the industry, one of which is very much from the world of Forrester, where agencies become much more technology-driven solutions providers, kind of marketing purveyors, I think, as you guys have talked about it. And another one where it's kind of the flip side to that, where they're really asserting their role as strategic and creative advisors. So kind of doubling down maybe more on the human side of it, if you will. So with that, I'd love to just ask you a few questions and get your perspective. And I'll start off with just kind of the basic one of, how are you defining the role of the agency in a world that's being reshaped by technology and we're seeing more client insourcing and obviously the big changer of AI? Where do you see this all going?
Yeah, well, thanks very much for including me in this. I appreciate the opportunity. And to answer your question, I think we increasingly are seeing how agencies will play more of a multimodal role in the future. And I outlined this in our recent Forrester predictions report. But to recap that, we made the statement that agencies resign their agency, just to kind of play off some industry language. And what we meant by that is that they're no longer solely playing the role of trusted partner and advisor or agent in which they exclusively represent the franchise and the needs of their clients. Of course, that is the historical motion and model that historical model that agencies have followed, and I think many will continue to play that role when they are compensated and contracted to do so. But in addition to that, we see other modes in which, as you say, they're merchants and resellers of proprietary products, proprietary data, and proprietary media. And as a merchant, they're playing a very different role where they're more or less a seller and no longer solely a buyer, and and are and are selling solutions and products to clients based upon need or appropriateness. But we also see other roles where, for some of the enterprise or larger agencies, are affiliates, and they're affiliates of larger matrixed organizations in which they contribute specialities or expertise as parts of teams or rosters or affiliate organizations designed to serve clients internationally across the globe. So we also see that motion. And then, of course, there are instances where they are primarily playing the role of, and I'll use the V word, vendor, right? In which they're contracted for, on a project basis to provide, specific deliverables or specific solutions. All of these things are appropriate depending upon the nature of it, but it is a distinction and a mindset shift away from being solely dedicated to the needs and interests of the client, and that causes, I think, some disruptions in the way that services are presented and purchased and received. It also probably causes some cognitive dissonance on both sides, where client expectations are more in line with the historical model of the agency and aren't fully taking into account the current reality of efficiencies and cost cutting and insourcing and
Yeah.
tech competitors, and so on and so forth. Simultaneously, I think some agencies are and their staff are experiencing some cognitive dissonance, thinking and feeling as if they are supposed to fully represent their clients as they always have in the past, but not having the scope or resources or manpower, if you will, or tech power to do so.
Do you, just to play on that a little bit, are there places, and you've talked about where some of those tensions are showing up, are there places where you're seeing that, are there types of in relationships or other places where you're seeing that more seamlessly occur, or where that's a more natural evolution versus some of the tension of kind of old world thinking versus new world applications or relationships, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does. The area that we see where this new multimodal future, if you will, agencies as purveyors of marketing products in principal media and in the media side, where the relationship is contractually quite clear. There was, of course, a time in the past where principal and probably with certain companies still the case where principal media was a bit murky and not as well defined. But I think there's been a conscious effort in reaction to ANA's work over the years to be more transparent or as transparent as possible, and consequently, that has led to a situation where there are multiple opt-ins for principal media products or proprietary media products, and so there theoretically can be an opt-in at the MSA level, so it's written in contractually, and then there's paperwork and an opt-in at each specific buy, and that I think that's led to a situation where it's very clear that in these instances the the agency is reselling products that they have developed, or procured. That said, there are instances in which that is less clear. That is, you know, I think fault on both sides, so to speak. And so there's an opportunity, I think, for even more clarity and transparency. But that's the area where I think that relationship, that changed relationship, if you will, is very clear. Where it is unclear, as I understand, is even internally inside on the creative agency side, in that interplay between the teams that originate or create the marketing concepts and marketing campaigns versus those that historically produce the assets and all the deliverables. There's much more crossover now between those two, and it has resulted in some instances the way that agencies have expressed it to me as a bit of an identity crisis on either side. And I think they're trying to figure out what their new role is and what that means for them as creators and producers, or hybrid creators and producers. I think is the reality of it. So I think there's a lot of room to adopt this thinking and develop this thinking, and media likely is a good model to at least look at and understand the best practices and pros and cons and move forward from there.
That's a great example. And I think, in its most simplest form, it kind of boils down to a little bit of over communication around kind of what the new rules are, what the new expectations are, being very deliberate and intentional and kind of what each new step is going to be and look like. So everybody's kind of clear. So that's interesting. As you think about, what clients are needing from their agency partners today, is there anything that in your mind is really missing right now, or that you feel like agencies are maybe either behind on or not aware of that clients need more from their agencies?
Molly, there's always the distinction between the stated need and the actual need, and sometimes they're quite, they're the same. I think most marketers are looking for support either in a strategic or in a consulting capacity to better connect the efforts of marketing to the business. At this stage, that may sound very much like a platitude, but it is it's a necessary item when creating an environment where the CMO can sit with equal footing with the CFO. And so I think that is an absolute burning need that is asked for and in actuality. There are times where their needs for budget relief and fee relief that are asked for that are not exactly what the situation would call for, but that's something that is that we hear about frequently, where they're looking for efficiencies in the overall costs of marketing. The ability to maximize the use of data and first party data is something that we hear about as a marketer need, both in the quantitative research and qualitatively with our marketing clients. And while it's very true, it's a very tricky proposition because it involves IP and data privacy and security, but that need still, exists, maximizing the use of their data and their understanding of data. One of the needs that is not as stated, but is implied, I think, is the need for innovation. The overall role of the agency, whether in a classic sense or in a multimodal sense, is to provide a sense of innovation, maximizing the use of emerging technologies, exploring ideas, exploring new solutions. I mean, that really is the ultimate value is of the agency, is the consumer or customer perspective, plus the innovative spirit that tends to thrive in an outsourced relationship more so than in an insourced situation. And while that need may not be leaping off the page from a survey or from data, it is one that is very implicitly understood.
It's an important one. And as we think also about agency compensation and making sure that agencies have the ability to invest to do that innovation, I think is one of the key challenges or concerns in terms of how we think about what the value or the promise of AI is in our organizations. And let me ask you, so as clients are investing more in in-house capabilities and platforms create more self-serve tools for marketers, where do you find agencies still delivering the most value? Especially considering your own research on in-house agency maturation and shifts in partner portfolios, what's kind of the irreplaceable role of agencies in your mind?
Well, it's an interesting one in that in-house agencies, the organizations that are set up to run and operate like a design agency or a creative agency or a media center of excellence, they typically lag in their embrace of innovation and emerging technology. And deliberately so, I would say, in some respects, proudly so, as I would interpret it. And what I would mean by that is that they deliberately understand that their role is not necessarily to pilot new technology and to make investments in technologies or techniques that are not yet proven, and they prefer to wait and take those that are and maximize and use them to their fullest advantage. Again, you see the distinction between innovation
Mhm.
as outsourced as opposed to efficiency that's insourced. There are several areas in which external agencies can provide. Um, First is in training the systems that are necessary to facilitate self-service. If you're a large enterprise, multinational company operating in dozens of markets and have the need for self-serve tools to localize and produce relevant, market accurate assets, then it needs to come from the right base, if you will, that in which there is a accurate understanding of the audiences. There is an accurate picture or profile or depiction or segmentation of those audiences. That knowledge is constantly refreshed with the digital signals that are available. Otherwise, that understanding grows stale. There is the need to continue to be the brand champions and the protectors of the brand, in helping to create the right governance structures so that downstream self-serve teams can be executing on brand, if you will. So I think the role of brand expert is still there, but maybe slightly different in the way that it is it is articulated or governed. We're talking about software now as opposed to style guides and mood boards and and essence videos, all of which I think are still can play a role and are useful tools, but translated differently,
Yeah.
into the systems that drive marketing. So I think that's still a role. As I said before, the external perspective is highly necessary and completely underrated. I mean, if we look across the either the industry or even society, the many of the issues that we face today is because our information and our perspectives are so insular, and bouncing off the the echo chamber, to use the cliche, but it's true, whether in whether from a societal standpoint or a cultural standpoint to a business and marketing standpoint. And the purpose of the agency is to politely push back, uh, again, when they are in a position to do so and are being compensated to be that type of consultative partner, to provide an external point of view, a different way to look at things. With all the technology and generative AI and agentic technologies, at the end of the day, there's still that saying that discovery is looking at what everyone else can see, um, but 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 thinking what no one else has thought.
Yeah.
And agencies can provide that external perspective to help their clients understand the some of the context of the broader world. So I still think that is a unique need as well. Scale is another need. The in-house teams are excellent at understanding the brand and understanding the business, because after all, they work for the brand and they work for the business. They're they're in the next room, they're in the room, quite frequently. But when it comes to to scaling these propositions across vast audiences and channel ecosystems, agencies are very good at that, particularly on the media side. And when media and production are appropriately coordinated, then I think you've really hit the sweet spot of being able to achieve scale. So I think those are kind of the broad needs that our outsource partners can bring.
Perfect. Thank you. So, what kind of capabilities or mindsets do you think clients are or should be looking for in an agency collaborator? Like, what are the attributes that they should be thinking about when assessing an agency?
I mean, like universally.
Yeah, answer it however makes sense for you. Universally, I mean, I'd also be interested, if you're seeing any sort of specific, beyond kind of mindsets, are you seeing any specific operating models kind of come
Mm,
with as well, as we're evolving here?
well, I mean, increasingly curiosity. I mean, it's always been about curiosity, but in a technology and AI context, I think it takes a certain kind of curious mind to be willing to, relearn some things, if you will, relearn the way that you do work, not necessarily what you do, but how you do it. So I think that's a very important attribute. Something that is, I think, a burning issue that is not prevalent right now, but is a mechanism or a model to maintain the apprenticeship that once existed inside agencies. I mean, the headcount numbers are pretty the headcount reduction numbers for 2025 are pretty significant. I just looked at this recently, where year over year, the publicly held companies that report are down 6% overall in headcount just between 24 and 25. And a lot of those roles, not exclusively, but a lot of those roles are, come from, both the mid to senior level to the lesser tenured employees, and those are the leaders of tomorrow, and they learn on the job. I mean, that's how I learned. That's how you learn, just by doing,
Sure. Yeah.
and when software is taking some of those responsibilities away and not creating those learning opportunities, then there is a threat to the craftsmanship it's a very real threat. I was actually just this weekend was watching a piece on BBC's AI Decoded where they were discussing a new 12-minute short feature that's been released that is, 100% AI created. And, normally we would look at something like this and think of it as the death of craftsmanship. But the studio was maintaining the point of view that it absolutely requires all the classic skills of filmmaking to be able to do this. They're just using a different set of tools. And if those those creative skill sets are dampered or somehow lost, then there is most certainly something that's lost in the creative proposition of marketing. I think what most C-suites don't fully appreciate is that it is both an art and a science, and it is not as measurable as one would ideally like it to be. But we have to embrace the reality that we're people, we're irrational, we're emotional, we're cathartic creatures, and that is something that cannot necessarily be, as tightly measured.
Yeah, I think that's really the sleeping giant of a problem that's gonna, I've got some agencies that are even talking about how they're having trouble just finding kind of mid-level people, and they go back to, 5 years ago was COVID, right? And so we lost a lot of
Yeah,
to that in
yep,
terms of incoming class, and they're feeling that much less what's gonna
yep.
be
This is
coming
not next year's problem. This is, 5 years from now's
now.
problem. And, like as a short anecdote, I was years ago, I sat down and had lunch with the president of the small liberal arts college that I went to, and this was, maybe it's 2018 or 2019. It's 2019, I think. And the president made the comment that 2017 and 2018 were very difficult enrollment years for the college. And I stopped for a moment and I said, do you have any sense from where that would come from why your numbers of enrollment would be, or applications even for that matter, were so significantly down? They said, yes, we know exactly what it is. The dot-com bust.
Interesting.
Very interesting. And what he was implying was that as a result of an economic downturn, that many American families deferred family planning, and it impacted the population of
Yeah.
eligible 18-year-old college freshmen, which in turn impacted this small liberal arts schools enrollment rates. So
So kind of switching gears a little bit, how might agencies balance being technology implementers with being independent strategic thinkers? Is there something lost if one goes in one direction or the other too far?
I think it's about being both. And when the business can support it, when the skill sets are there, if
Mhm.
meaning that if we're talking about a small independent agency, they may choose to be a point specialist and may not offer every single solution or capability. But for those that endeavor to do so, or those that are larger organizations and have the structures to which to do so and the resources to do so, then I think it is about being, consultative when necessary, and executional when necessary, and that's maintaining, very different skill sets, and different competencies, and and understanding when and where to, of course, apply it. And that's not any different than the way things have been in the agency world in the past, although the skill sets may be slightly different, the expertise may be slightly. I mean, consulting is a relatively newish practice area inside agencies, but has, grown in popularity and demand because of the need to attach, strategic solutions with executional solutions. And so I think it's about being both, and understanding when the cross sell is appropriate or not appropriate, or necessary. And then with the employees understanding that that being a specialist in one or the other is not a negative or a detractor. Again, going back to the identity crisis, piece that there will be some, there will be times where there's crossover and there will be times when there's not. And you have to be, comfortable with that.
So following that through, then I'm curious, are you seeing agencies reinventing their business model, IP talent or ownership or, compensation model or just how they go to market, like from an operational standpoint? What shifts are you seeing to help agencies thrive in this kind of next era?
Yeah, it's more about providing the consultative practices to help pilot emerging technologies. Just yesterday, I was having a conversation with a client about using their current media agency as a mechanism to help them insource a certain amount of the media responsibilities that they want to take on internally, and that using the expertise and the consultative skills of their agency will help them be more successful in setting up the appropriate technology stack, hiring the right people, training them, and transferring the necessary responsibilities. And I've seen many examples of agencies embrace that type of in-house or in-housing or in-sourcing consulting because it behooves them to do so. It helps their client, and of course, they have a high likelihood to recapture the business should there be a a strategy shift in the future by staying a partner as opposed to not. So there's one example. I see very few examples of model reinvention as it relates to to compensation, because it's such a tricky situation, in which, I mean, it's still, even with all the change in headcount, it's still a talent business. It's still a services business, and the ROI of certain technologies is still a little murky and not totally clear. So again, I think the media agencies have a better example to follow in this, in that they have been more successful at implementing technology as part of their services and delivery, and have found mechanisms to be compensated for that, whether in the form of tech fees, or in the form of performance-based remuneration, that is more in line with the value of of the output than not. And those seem to be two really good ways to fund the necessary skills and resources and technology resources that are necessary.
What do you think is the most dangerous assumption agencies are making about the future right now?
I would think the most dangerous assumption that is being made right now is that automation and headcount reduction will lead to profitability.
Is that because you think the investments that are going to be needed are going to offset those, or
I think it relates very heavily to the topic that we were talking about a few moments ago, in that you may adjust your headcount to revenue ratio in such a way that there's a really short term couple of quarters benefit to that, but then the lack of talent catches up to you.
yeah,
Um, I think across society at large, there has been a shift in our attitudes towards expertise and talent, and thinking of talent and employees as disposable. And this will not only just the agency industry, but all industries, I think, will this will haunt them in the not so distant future, when when we do discover that there are limitations to automation and to software capabilities, whether they be compute and CPU limitations because of the lack of advancement in chip technology or energy resources or sustainability considerations that, believe it or not, do have some significance in other parts of the globe. There's a tremendous amount of innovation happening in China, in the United States, in parts of the EU, but really nowhere else. And comparatively speaking, and it will really come down to people and talent. And the pendulum will swing the other way eventually. And if companies, including agencies, are not ready for that, they're going to be caught in a situation where they do not have the expertise or the talent to deliver what their clients are looking for.
Yeah, that's a great watch out. So, speaking of that talent, what's one piece of advice that you give the next generation of agency leaders to best prepare them for the future of our industry?
Get on the new business team.
Mm,
Get on the new business team, even if it's a night job, and do it for several years. You'll see the entire process come together in a very short duration, in a more idealized setting, i.e., where the impetus and the onus is not to work on a piece of business or serve a piece of business, but to deliver a solution and deliver it in an accelerated time frame. And that is a great training ground.
is there, and I think I know what you're going to answer on this, but of the two visions that we're kind of laying down, obviously they're two kind of extremes. Is there one that you think is more viable than the other in the long?
Oh, wow. I mean, that is the question, isn't it? It's interesting. I went back and looked at a piece of research that I wrote in 2018 essentially when I first arrived at Forrester, and this was the report about the holding companies. You might require or recall that report, and in that we had a figure in which we said that there were two potential paths for holding companies. One is a master brand structure in which there is a centralized single brand that is um, uh, channeled down to all the individual entities, and it is a more integrated, unified go-to-market motion, as opposed to a house of brands, what is more or less a collection of various agency brands. And we, at the time in 2018, mapped out which holding companies reflected which structure. And for master brand, we listed Havas, Publicis, and Dentsu. For house of brands or collection of brands, we listed WPP, IPG, Omnicom, Stagwell, MDC. And it's just so striking that that is exactly the case 8 years later. That vision of an integrated global go to market versus using their language, strong, culturally relevant agency brands, that that still exists in the marketplace today. And you can't, you look at the performance across that list, and you can't say that one is necessarily better than the other, right? Because if the master brand approach, if the unified kind of, to use the term power of one, which is Publicis's expression of it, is correct, then why is Dentsu experiencing the financial duress that they are, or on the other side of it, if the collection of agency brands, the kind of agency brand centric go to market is appropriate, then why are IPG, you know,
The amount of consolidation that's happening.
right? Why are they experiencing the difficulties, IPG and WPP, that they are? I don't know if it comes down to the go to market.
Mm,
I think that's only part of it,
mm.
and that whether you're a single integrated entity or you're a federated group of agency brands that compete. I mean, we clearly understand that that the federated model has had has had its limitations, but evidently so does does the integrated model. And it's obviously more than that. It's more than just the way that you go to market. I think it is it is the proprietary products that you've developed to go to market with. It is the data assets with which you are using to power your capabilities. It's the culture and the vibe inside the organization that you create. It is the cult of personality in which it is presented at times, and it is likely the types of contracts and remuneration that are written as a result of it. So I don't think it's one thing; it's all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. As always, it's more complex than a simple narrative would allow for. Also, Jay, anything I just am not smart enough to know to ask you that you want to add into this in terms of where you think the world is headed over the next year or so, or that agencies should be thinking about? Is there anything that's AI has sucked out all the energy and all the oxygen of the room? I'm curious, is there any sleeping
Um,
out there that we should be talking about besides talent?
Talent for sure. I mean, when it comes to AI, it's more about what you can, it's more about the AI. It's less about the AI itself and more about what you're doing with it. There was a point at which I was starting to feel a bit relieved that we were going to stop talking about the technology itself and start focusing on what it allows you to
Yeah.
do. And we're getting there, and that's what I think that's what makes sense. And my strong belief that it's not one or the other, it's both the creative intuitions and ideas of your experts combined with the 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 power of your technology, and those two things combined will help deliver meaningful growth and growth initiatives.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let me throw one wild card at you if you don't mind, and you can
Sure.
tell you can mysteriously have a connection issue if you want at the end. PE money has been in the industry for a while now, but it just is becoming a much bigger player than it had been, and we're just seeing so much acquisition happening. And how do you see that changing our business or changing, yeah, well, changing our industry?
Yeah,
There.
great question. Private equity investments are radically transforming the landscape. They're creating Initially, they were creating the new full service media agencies. Now they are going to be creating the new full service agencies. And the headline just hit this morning, where W Promote, a PE backed performance media agency, now more or less a full service media agency, just bought Giant Spoon. Yeah, that's quite an accomplishment for those two companies to bring together their propositions. And I think what we'll be looking at is private equity growing and developing the agency networks of the future.
Interesting. Yeah, in some ways, it's a little bit of a repeat of when the holding companies started to manifest.
Yes, but deliberately so. The private equity is deliberately not is not necessarily acquiring competitive resources and housing them as competitive resources. They're acquiring compatible resources with the I think the deliberate intent to create something that's larger than the sum of the parts, as opposed to a group of separate P&Ls that are bickering over the same budget.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. All right, that's the end of my list. Anything you want to throw in there for posterity?
I think you got it. Sounds good.